Good morning, everyone. How are you? Thanks for being here. I'm sure it feels a little bit odd to be talking about a legislative town hall in the middle of September, but getting ready for what happens in Annapolis every year, we've learned is a process that needs to start earlier instead of later. That the faster we can get a jump on trying to corral the community's priorities, develop our own priorities, and present those to our delegation, the better off we are. We used to have a legislative meeting with all of our delegation members in December of every year, and that's really late. We've now moved that conversation up to October. And so in advance of trying to do that in October, we want to make sure that we're well on time in terms of building a legislative package for the city of Frederick to present to them when we get together with them next month. And so really what we want to do is talk a little bit about the process with you, the state budget process, how the city can ask for and receive funding from the state for various things, to gain the community's perspective on desires for any capital projects or other legislative items that they might want the city to focus on. There are literally 1,000 things that 1,000 people could want legislatively from the General Assembly when they meet every year. To the degree that we can focus our attention on those items that would be most appropriate for the city of Frederick to advocate for, I think would be really helpful in the conversation. And then using the feedback from the public, what we hear from you today, to talk to our state delegation, to advocate through our advocacy team and through our representatives in Annapolis for inclusion of those items in the state budget. We are extraordinarily lucky in the city of Frederick that our working relationship with our direct delegation, which is District 3, we're in District 3 in the state. So our relationship with our District 3 partners, Senator Karen Lewis Young, Delegates Ken Kerr, Karen Simpson, and Chris Fair, is an outstanding working relationship. We have open lines of communication with them. I meet regularly with each of them. The staffs are in constant communication. The communication flows very well back and forth. And I think that serves the city of Frederick really well when it comes to legislative items that we want to bring forward. It's important for us to do this kind of work because our tax dollars in the city of Frederick are flowing to Annapolis, and we want those dollars to work in Annapolis on behalf of our residents the best way they can. And one of the ways those dollars work for us is they come back to the city for projects that we've identified as being critically important. And so those infrastructure projects, education, healthcare, community development projects are all really critical to us doing the kinds of things that our residents tell us every day are important. This is about economic development as well. We're looking at projects that we think drive community development, which ultimately builds individual wealth. And we want that to happen in a way that supports people, supports families, and ultimately supports communities. So we look at this advocacy on behalf of bringing state dollars back to the city as really critical for economic development. The most critical economic development thing that we can offer to residents in the city of Frederick is an opportunity for them to get a job, and to work and to be productive community members. And when we do that, we're building that individual and hopefully generational wealth for our residents. And of course, we're looking at projects that enhance the quality of life. One of the things that I think the city has really benefited from over the last decade is that we've done a lot of projects that have enhanced quality of life. And it is why, for better or for worse, we are a desirable place for people to live. People want to come to Frederick. They want to be here. They want to be a part of this community because we have built a high quality of life for our residents. And those of you who are here in business also made a decision to come to Frederick and to do business in Frederick. And I hope it's because you said Frederick seems like a good place to do business, and it is a good place to do business, but we can't take that for granted. We have to make sure that we're working every day on projects and programs and initiatives with our business community to make sure that their opportunity to grow, expand, retain workers, workforce projects is front and center, because we don't have a thriving city of Frederick without a thriving business community in Frederick. The two things absolutely go hand in hand, and that thriving business community helps to drive that high quality of life for our residents. One of the things that we need to do at this time of year as well is we have to make sure that the budget manager for the governor's office knows what our priorities are. The governor, much like the way the budgeting process works in the city of Frederick, the budget starts in the executive branch, and the executive's responsibility is to build a budget and present that to the legislature. And our advocacy to the governor's office for our priorities early gives us the best chance of clearing maybe the biggest hurdle in getting local projects funded, which is having that funding be in the budget when the governor presents it to the legislature. It is a lot easier to keep money in the governor's budget than it is to get money into the governor's budget. So by being successful in working with the governor's office, and it's another place where we build strong relationships, we have a good opportunity. We certainly will work with our legislators in the General Assembly if we don't have project funding in the governor's budget to make sure that we can advocate for funding to be added. That's the legislative bond initiative process. So there's an amount of money that's allocated every year for legislators to be able to bring projects back to their home communities. And so something, if it doesn't end up in the governor's budget, our second chance at that is to work directly with our delegation to get funding support for the projects that matter. And then there's the cabinet level departments, and working once there's allocated funding within those budgets, or getting ensuring that there is funding in the budget for projects that we know we may have eligible projects for, making sure that those departments are funded at a level that can support the projects that we've identified that are important to us, that we would go through the departments in order to get funding support. So we wanted to give you a sense of some of the projects over the last handful of years that we've had some success in getting state funding for. We got $4.25 million 2 years ago for the downtown police headquarters project. That was a more than 25, close to $30 million project. And so to have the state investing $4.25 million into that was critically important, and making sure that we could keep that project moving forward and get it done on time. Obviously, anybody who's downtown has heard a lot about the Downtown Hotel and Conference Center project, a project that we've been working on for quite some time. We've been successful over the last several years of having the governor fund in his budget direct state support for the public improvements largely that are necessary as a part of that project. So it's really important for us to talk about how the public money in this project is intended to flow in the direction of largely public improvements, parking facilities, street side improvements, infrastructure. The city, the state, one might say it's all one thing. Our intent is not to fund and operate a hotel. It's to make sure that we're creating an environment where a hotel in downtown Frederick with conference facilities can be successful. We announced back in the summertime, we announced, I think, earlier in the year that we had received funding from the Maryland Stadium Authority to do nearly $40 million of renovations to Harry Grove Stadium. We were doing that in an effort to meet player development standards so that we could attract affiliated minor league baseball back to Frederick. And back in the late summer, we were able to announce that, in fact, that will be happening as a result of these improvements in the spring of 2026. The Maryland Stadium Authority funding is a little bit of a different avenue for the way money might flow back to local governments. It's not directly in the budget the way some of these other allocations are, but it requires the legislature to act. The legislature had to create and allow this fund to be in existence for the city to then go through the Maryland Stadium Authority to tap into that for these stadium improvements. We have annually made requests for various local bond initiatives, traffic calming, our youth center project, which is in the design and programmatic schematic design phase now over on Scotty's Bus Lane off Jefferson Street, the community table renovations that we're looking to do down at 100 South Market Street to upgrade that facility operated by our Department of Housing and Human Services. And then advocacy for really big capital projects like the safety and widening project of Route 15. A couple of years ago, the project was sort of sidelined momentarily. Funding was taken out of the transportation plan for a lot of transportation projects across the state. We were successful in getting the design and construction funding put back into that 6-year plan, and that is moving forward. It's a critical piece of infrastructure, not because it's going to solve all of the traffic challenges that we deal with every day in the city of Frederick. It's critical because we can't even think about future transportation improvement projects if we don't fix that giant bottleneck that's bidirectional virtually every hour of the day between the city of Frederick. From an economic development perspective, somebody coming to look at the city of Frederick to do business, getting stuck in traffic on Route 15 is not a good look. And when we have situations like the tanker crash a year and a half ago, it's a demonstration of the real need for the safety improvements that widening project will do. And a piece of it is sound barriers for the neighborhoods on both sides of Route 15, which is a quality of life improvement for everyone that lives along that corridor. We also advocated, as I mentioned before, on behalf of not capital projects, but actual legislation that matters. And so we were advocate on immigration protections in the General Assembly last year, supporting the Protecting Sensitive Locations Act, allowing things like schools and churches to function as schools and churches have historically functioned without forcing them to get involved in something that really isn't their mission on a daily basis. We advocated and have for a number of years on improving automated enforcement opportunities in municipalities all across the state, but certainly in the city of Frederick. Our use of automated speed monitoring, automated traffic enforcement with red light cameras. We're going to continue to try and advocate for ways to get sound monitoring as a part of that process. We know that noise, traffic, transportation, speeding are recurring issues all across the city, and we want as many tools as the legislature will give us to be able to address that. We are part of the MOVE Coalition, which is a collection of organizations that are all pulling in the same direction on these Route 15 projects. And we think that by having so many partners sitting at the table talking with the same voice about the same things is a really powerful way for us to see progress on what matters to us. And then we've looked at how we need to make sure that in response to changing federal mandates and the approach that the federal government is taking to its workforce, that we're positioning the city of Frederick to not lose in that transaction. We know the changes are coming. We rely pretty heavily on the workforce that exists at Fort Detrick and at various agencies and businesses that are located in Frederick because of that federal presence. And we want to make sure that as we're looking at what that impact could be on the city of Frederick, that we're part of the conversations to make sure that there's workforce to be redeployed in response to any layoffs or shifts in worker. We're positioned to take advantage of that. We want to make sure that we're remaining a high quality of life location, even if the imprint of the federal government on the city of Frederick should be shifting. So this really is an opportunity for us to hear from all of you. We have created this public feedback form, and so you certainly are invited to take this information and share it with those who cannot be here. We want to make sure that as many people as possible are weighing in on where our priorities and focus should be. For those who choose to avoid QR codes for whatever the reason might be, there are paper forms available as well. And we have an online survey that you can fill out as well. So that's my presentation to give you the big overview about what we've done and why we're here. But the rest of the time that we've allotted today is really for you to tell us. And so I don't think we did any kind of a sign-up sheet. This is an enormous group. We'll hope that you can organize yourselves into a line to the microphone. We would ask you to just identify yourself. And we don't have a strict time limit per se, but in respect of everyone who's here. Don't talk for an hour. Thanks very much. Please come forward to the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Mayor and everyone that's here today. My name is Christian Benford. I appreciate the work you've done with immigrant protection, especially here in the city, but also on the Maryland state level. I asked for this legislative session. Last legislative session, House Bill 1222, the Maryland Values Act, was pretty much neutered when it got to the state Senate. I asked that we advocate for it to be fully protected, to get 287G out of our communities. It's incredibly harmful. Our tax dollars should not be going to support this directly from us. And I think it's also going to help with a lot of community safety, especially in the immigrant community, where there's a lot of fear of even reporting to the police because they're afraid Chunk Jenkins is going to grab them. So thank you.
Hey, Mayor O'Connor. You know me, Greg Brown. I own a couple restaurants in the area, live in Frederick County. The one thing that I would challenge with, and obviously I think everyone in this room understands it is a burden and impacts people, is really affordability. And so as we're looking at, and advocating and working with Annapolis, I think it's important that folks understand the significant increases in taxes and utilities. So water, energy is continuing to go up. When I talk housing, is obviously a big item. And if you kind of carve into the data on that, we see significant increases in real estate and property taxes. We see significant increases that continue to come from an energy standpoint, which in many cases, a lot of that has to do with policy decisions made 3 or 4 years ago, which basically forced power companies out of the state of Maryland. You look at schools. One question that I've had on schools, I build a lot of things. I own restaurants, but I also, I build. And one question that I have, which directly impacts the taxpayers and affordability, is why does it cost us 3 times more per square foot to build a school than it would cost me to build a restaurant? And the pushback I get on that is basically, well, the state has a lot of regulations and things that we have to adhere to, and I understand that. But in general, my challenge is to push back and challenge Annapolis to get their ducks and their house in a row, because their decisions, from my perspective, continue to place significant burden on the residents and also the business owners in the city of Frederick and also Frederick County. And I think those are things that we really need to get our hands around and push hard for better transparency and, quite frankly, driving more efficient decisions out of Annapolis, because our current, the government spend, which it's not just local. Some of it is the state has gone through, different ways of essentially sucking money out of the counties and the cities, while at the same time placing more requirements on the counties and the cities. And so ultimately, some of those costs are ultimately getting directly burdened to the people living here. We talked about Frederick is a phenomenal place to live. One of the big things and one of the big draws to Frederick over the past 20, 30 years has been the cost of living. The cost of living in Frederick has been significantly less than what it has been in some of our neighboring counties closer to DC. So I think it's important that we stay true to really what got us to where we are today and really hone in on the cost of living for the folks of Frederick. I mean, this is disposable income. From a business standpoint, I'm a business owner, but everyone should understand, right? As my real estate taxes go up, as my energy costs go up, someone has to pay for those from someone renting an apartment. Those are commercial properties. As those commercial property taxes go up, those renters are being burdened significantly by the cost of the increases in taxes. That's taking away from their disposable income. And quite frankly, it's inflationary in nature. So from my perspective, again, I would just say, please, we need to push back more on Annapolis and challenge their decision-making, because their decision-making continues to place significant and undue burden on renters, homeowners, businesses in the entire city and Frederick County.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Julia Ferguson. I live and have a business in downtown Frederick. So kind of playing off some of what was just said there. I have a list, but I won't take an hour. By my last research, 84% of the businesses in Frederick have fewer than 10 employees, and we're one of those businesses. And one of the things that I've noticed over the past few years is all these things that keep coming out, family, the Maryland Saves, or whatever, that are intended to do good things, but they're creating a lot of burden on small businesses. I'm struggling to even have my first 2 employees. And then I do all the bookkeeping. Now suddenly I have to keep up with all these things. So one thing, it's not necessarily a money thing per se, but I would ask that you ask the state of Maryland to consider whether there's a threshold for what how small business has to be before you, or how large it has to be before you start kicking in some of those programs, which are expense to us, but also just the administrative burden. As we're looking at things like US 15, the expansion, and a lot of things that are happening, it feels to me like we're planning for the problems that we have right now. And I really want us to look farther into the future and think about what's going to be scalable, what's going to be sustainable, what's going to do things like keep clean air, clean water, avoid light pollution, noise pollution. So for example, with US 15, my wish would have been that there was public transportation rather than an expanded highway with more cars. It's the same, hopefully, if you're going to spend a lot of money on roads, spend that money instead on something that hopefully will last into the future better. My perspective is very much from downtown Frederick, and I realize there's other areas, but I would really like to see some funding for downtown restrooms and comfort center, both as an individual and as a business. We see every day how people struggle to find a place for their children to go to the bathroom, people that need to have, to clean up or whatever. And I know this is something also that the Downtown Frederick Partnership has been advocating for, but recognizing that downtown continues to draw more and more and more people, I really think we need to have some funding around that, as well as looking at not necessarily more parking and car-based solutions, but a broader mobility plan, again, that is more scalable. I just really feel like those things should be a priority. And I think that Frederick has been and can continue to be a driving force for progressive planning, and not just reacting to what the current needs are.
Thank you. We're taking all the input that we can, but you mentioned something I just wanted to provide just a brief update on, because I can talk about a little bit of progress. We're not done. There's more work to be done in this area of public comfort stations, but new construction on the east end of Carroll Creek for a pumping station will include public restrooms on the eastern end of Carroll Creek.
When are they going to be open?
I don't know the answer to that, but the question, we can certainly find out when that is. It's the answer is soon. Well, I don't want to assume that done is done, but I know that we're getting very close.
Thank you for that, because with the restrooms being closed in the parking garages, I find that our parking lot has become a substitute restroom for many people, and we're tired of that.
Good.
Hello, Sarah Hempel-Irani here. I would like to piggyback a little bit on the transportation issue. I went to a workshop yesterday where we were here in this room talking about Alice households and transportation. And I think 45% of city residents are at Alice and below, and they can save a considerable amount of money using public transit. And I know that a lot of the funding for transit comes from the state and from federal sources. And I'm concerned with the cuts in federal monies that they're going to lose some funding when, in fact, they probably need more to create a more robust system. And I would like to echo what you've said about investing in public transit rather than just focusing on car-based transportation.
My name is Dr. Jedediah Smith. I'm a traditional naturopathic doctor here in the downtown area. And I'm right on the corner of West 2nd Street. I wanted to bring to the attention of something that I've had patients I've had a problem with here in the downtown area, and that's the sidewalks, the conditions of the sidewalks. I can't tell you, I've had over a dozen patients fall because the sidewalks are an obstacle course. And I have even noticed that I would love to be able to pay attention much more and view what's going on around, but I've got to also watch that I don't fall myself. And as I've said, I've had patients come in and they're skinned up and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. So even though I love the brick and everything, somehow it seems like to me that, marking the sidewalks with fluorescent paint, it can help, but is there something we can do even to smooth this out so it makes it safer for people to literally walk in the downtown area? That would be my observation. Thank you.
We are conducting a citywide sidewalk survey because this issue of sidewalks and the way the code is currently written, the obligation of repairing sidewalks belongs to adjoining property owners. And there's been a lot of conversation about whether that's a equitable system. And before we can even have a conversation about whether we should change that model, we have to understand what the condition looks like. So this condition survey that we're doing is really a chance for us to assess how bad of a problem do we have if, in fact, when people say the city should do it, what they're really saying is the taxpayers should all contribute somehow to make sidewalks better. And we need to understand what that looks like before we just say, sure, let's take on sidewalk. So that assessment is happening now.
But it can make it more consistent and
Yep.
uniform too. Right now, it's not.
Building on that,
Kara Norman with Downtown Frederick Partnership. And we do have a project underway to improve we call it the Downtown Frederick Streetscape Project, but honestly, it's better sidewalks is really what it is. In downtown Frederick, we have terrible sidewalks, as you just noted, and I would fully agree they're in awful condition. But part of the issue is our trees, and our tree wells are too small. So we're going to continue to have an issue until we address something more than just replacing the sidewalk surface, which is what this project is about. We're in a critical moment for that project because there's also need for stormwater enhancement, which will be happening between basically the creek and 3rd Street along Market Street. So it's very important that there's some advocacy for additional funding so that those two projects line up and we dig once and deal with stormwater and sidewalks at the same time. That's not to say that we only need to do those sidewalks, but it's critically important if we're digging in the ground to do everything at the same time. So I think state level funding for that would be very helpful.
I forgot something on my list, so I'm just going to, no one else. So
I'll allow it.
just quickly. So someone had mentioned about the increasing prices and all that. So also in particular, a downtown person who would like to possibly expand my business some more. One of the things that I'm finding is Frederick has become increasingly popular and news of the downtown hotel has come in. Property values are going way up. And so even approaching a neighbor to try to see if I could work out a deal, he's already getting offers from out of town people for a tiny buildings for over $1 million. So I don't know exactly what it would look like, but or how it could be done in a fair and equitable way. But it would be really nice if there was a way to support local small businesses who want to expand, whether that's more grant money or applications or loans or something, but funding, because now I'm competing with huge businesses to try to expand my tiny local business. And I think part of what made Frederick so appealing is that it was grown locally by individuals. It wasn't big corporations or chains or whatever. And so I fear that we'll lose that as the appeal of Frederick increases and we get more and more big investors coming in. Just great for people selling the properties, but maybe not so great for the town overall to keep our quaint, culture that we have.
Right.
Sorry, I found the books.
Hi there, Sarah Weiland. I am a resident policy researcher in my professional life. And I just want to thank you for your efforts to have this town hall and working with such a difficult climate politically and financially overall. So we really appreciate it. I have done 10 years of research on community well-being and seen how different sectors kind of come together for these types of legislative priorities. So I think looking at the list and what you've been able to accomplish is great. It's not uncommon that the community funding was the lowest number on the list. It's hard in the political realm to bring in more money for youth or bring in more money for nonprofits that need certain funding for certain needs in the community. But I would say if there's any way to keep pushing on that, even in the hardest political climate, that's my personal preference as a resident. And one thing I haven't heard yet is kind of about the environment and the use of water. We have a great organization within the city, in the county, that talks about the drought situation. I would encourage maybe some sort of program for businesses to help contribute to management of water, specifically around all of the construction that's happening. I live in a new build neighborhood now, and what I see happening with practices around sprinklers use just to get the grass green to sell the house, or pulling water from Carroll Creek to water the land. It seems a bit not well thought out for the future. So those are my legislative priorities. And I would just then say another common thing that happens, according to my research, is these town halls are, limited attendance. Civic participation is hard for those in low income situations who have to be at work when we can all be here. So I would recommend, if this does not something you already do, is a mobile town hall. It's great that you have the online version, but if people don't have internet, they can't make it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We are recording this, so we do want to make sure that for those who could not attend, the information that we've shared and you all have shared as well will be accessible outside of these times. But the point is something we consider often about how we try and reach as many people as we can. We only have to get to 85,000 of them in the city.
Hello, my name is William Reed. I'm chair of Frederick County Progressives. I really wasn't going to say anything, but I do have to say that as an organization, we're going to advocate for rent stabilization and increasing wages because I heard one of the gentlemen say that Frederick is a lovely place, but that the price of housing is high, and but we're lower than Montgomery County. I'm assuming you meant Montgomery County and Washington, D.C., the metro area. But people that work here don't make the Montgomery County salaries. And so, I think that I know business owners don't like hearing this, but I think that looking at trying to bring worker salaries up to help prevent gentrification of neighborhoods and increasing housing prices and rental prices has to be a priority.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank a previous speaker for mentioning us with odd hours. I think I'm, no offense, the youngest person in this room, and I'm very grateful to actually be here, and that's only because I'm a student at the time. I asked also in reflecting comments about affordability that we could try to request money either to do a land value assessment or infill assessment. I don't think there is a need to build out as much as there is to utilize the space that we aren't doing current business on. That includes corridors along East Route 40, where we just have big empty lots. I'm not saying you have to put an apartment complex right in front of the old mall, but there's a better utilization of that space that I don't think is being done. So land value assessment, maybe we don't need 3 gas stations right next to each other. I'm obviously just spitballing here, but again, looking at affordability and building options that doesn't always have to require us pushing out. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wants to offer some comment? Sure.
Hi, my name's Josh Phipps. We have a brewery downtown that just opened in the spring, and we're just at the fringe of town. And one of the things that we've noticed, it's challenging for us to get people to come up to our neck of the woods, which is fine. We have to find ways to do that. But I know East Street Rising is working on building bike lanes and whatnot, sort of making it more accessible to get up that side of the neck of the woods. But I would have mentioned that, and I'm kind of echoing the concept of having different mobility mechanisms and potentially like not just bike lanes, but like a bike share, more bike racks. Like, because I mean, I came from the DC area, and like bikers have like more rights than cars down there, which is cool because you're trying to get people moving around, less people driving around. And I think, out 40 and all these other areas where they're building a lot more things, instead of having to hop in your car to go downtown to park in a garage and sit in traffic, if I could hop on my bike and be there and like just drop my bike somewhere and just move quicker and easier and less, and that's the carbon footprint, the noise, and all that sort of stuff like that. So I guess it's sort of I would sort of advocate for. Also an avid biker too. So I think it's pretty cool and a pretty great way for the community to sort of become more healthy and help everything else in general. And it doesn't have to be a huge lift, but just sort of promoting Frederick as a more bike friendly sort of location. Anyway,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Once again, thank you all for being here. This is the first of two of these that we're going to do. This one we promoted as being really more directed towards business. Next Thursday, we're going to do one that is geared more towards our nonprofit community. And of course, we're making the surveys and those other mechanisms available because we want to hear, obviously, from the general public as well. But thank you very much. We certainly appreciate your time and your consideration and your advocacy. We cannot do this work as public officials without the engagement of our residents in the process at every step of the way. So thank you so much for your involvement. Have a wonderful day. Bye.